It is not speculation to state that Andreessen rejected the biblical calendar through fear of the consequences. He stated as much himself. The committee has done a most excellent piece of work. The endorsing, unreservedly, of the plano before us seems to me, appears in its implications so loaded with dynamite, with TNT, that we might well beware. I would most earnestly warn the committee in this matter. I am afraid that the repercussions of such endorsement at this time will be felt in wide circles. Andreessen's proposed solution to the situation is a heartbreaking example of political expediency taking precedence over truth, M.L. Andreessen continues. A possible solution. I suggest that we make a report to GC President Brother McElhaney of what the Millerites believed and how they arrived at their conclusions, without, at this time, committing ourselves upon the correctness of their method. Let Brother McElhaney publish this report in any way it may be thought best, and let us await the reaction. This, of course, would be only a preliminary report, and would be so designated. We will soon see what fire it will draw. In the meantime, let us study further on the final report. The reaction to the preliminary report may determine the form of the final report. In other words, Andreessen was urging, let us focus on how the Millerites established October 22nd, rather than September 23rd, as the Day of Atonement for 1844, but let us not come right out and admit that we agree with how they established it. Let us test the waters and, depending upon the reaction to our test, we can know whether or not we wish to say more. This is not intellectual honesty. It is intellectual cowardice. Truth remains the same, regardless of the reaction against it. Andreessen was most eloquent in his arguments in favor of staying silent about the effect the biblical calendar has on the weekly seventh-day Sabbath. M.L. Andreessen argued that the truth should be suppressed as the average Adventist would not be able to understand it. Some of his letters are so damaging that the SDA Church has still not released them to the general public. He wrote a number of letters in which he urged the research committee to remain silent on the subject. These letters are not available to the general public. Apparently, the Church still considers the content too revealing, too explosive to want it released. Copies of these letters were given to the members of the Research Committee of 1995, but the committee members were not allowed to leave the room with them. We would have made copies of them, but they picked them up before they let us leave the room, recalled one committee member. Ultimately, cover it up is exactly what the original Research Committee did. The GC Committee Minutes 25 of May 31, 1939 state, a committee that was appointed to do certain research work presented a statement concerning their extensive report which is now ready. It was felt that this report should be presented to as representative a group as possible, and it was therefore voted to set July 9 and 10, beginning at 9 a.m., July 9, as the time for hearing the report in order that the Union Conference presidents, who will be in attendance at the General Conference Committee meeting in New York City just preceding this date, may be present, and further, that the officers be asked to invite any others they may think advisable to be present when the report is given. Strangely enough, although the meeting did take place, there appears to be no record of it. Perhaps, as with the Andreessen letters given to the 1995 committee to read, it was considered too damaging and has simply not been made available to the general public. It is certainly unusual for a meeting of this type to leave no record, save for references to it in personal correspondence by people who attended. The full scope of this meeting can be grasped from a description provided by J.H. Wiertz Wowis, also in attendance. At this meeting were present all the General Conference members available, all the Union presidents in the U.S., many Bible teachers, many ministers and many others. The reading of the RC's Research Committee's report started at 9:30 a.m. and the meeting ended about 10:00 p.m. Please see page 30 of J.H. Wiertz, letter to L.E. Froome, June 29, 1945, Grace Amadon Collection, Box 5, Folder 9. Political expediency was the theme of the day, and the full effect of the biblical calendar upon long-held assumptions of the Church was covered up as report of Committee on Historical Basis, Involvements, and Validity of the October 22, 1844, position was presented. J.H. Wiertz was heartsick. Different members of the Research Committee had written different sections of the six-part report. We Weertz was most upset with one of the sections written by Grace Ahmad. Part 5. This section, entitled Crucifixion Date, an Astronomical Soundness of October 22, not only twisted facts in order to force a Friday crucifixion, but it did not address the points he had raised from the very beginning. Intellectual honesty compelled him, at the end, to stand in front of the gathered assembly, denounce it for its skewed and inaccurate treatment of historical and astronomical facts. The injustice done truth under the charismatic influence of Grace Ahmad was recalled by Weertz several years later when he wrote L.E. Froome after receiving notice of her death. This letter is worth quoting extensively because it provides an insight into the machinations done by the research committee to deny the impact of lunisolar calendation on the seventh-day Sabbath. Weertz speaking. About 3 days ago I read your notice in the RH Review and Herald of the death of Sister Ahmad. I was surprised and somewhat disappointed. However, I feel constrained to make a few observations. My first observation is this: you say, because of her brilliance, she won the admiration of her associates, the RC Research Committee. It would have been more true if you had said, because of her brilliance her associates, the RC, allowed itself to be put under an Ahmadonian spell, from which after almost 7 long years, her associates, the RC, has not as yet completely recovered, as Elder Froome's writings about Miss Ahmad plainly show. Ahmad made extensive claims that the United States Naval Observatory supported her claims based on astronomical information she had obtained from their records and calculations. Weertz revealed such claims to be misleading at best, duplicitous at worst. Weertz continues, my second observation, your statement about the support of the Associate Astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory, Mr. Glenn Draper, that he checked and affirmed her work. Well, Brother Froome, perhaps you don't know, therefore I feel it my duty to reveal a few things to you, for your own good and others. Of course it is true what you say that Miss Ahmad had not frequent contact with Mr. Draper. Yes, even to the extent that Miss Ahmad was officially forbidden entrance to the observatory library. One time before September 1943, Miss Ahmad came with a taxi to the observatory entrance. She informed the guard at the gate that she wanted to go to the library and see Mr. Draper. The guard phoned to the library Miss Ahmad's request, and the answer was, Miss Ahmad is forbidden to enter the observatory grounds and forbidden to enter the library. However, because of her persistence to see Mr. Draper, he had to go to the gate to talk with Miss Ahmad. The closing words to me by one of the observatory's officials was, the man, or group of men who are supporting Miss Ahmad must be a group of men without brains. And the next statement was, Uncle Sam, the U.S. government needs workers, Miss Ahmad should be wrapping packages for him. At the Congressional Library Miss Ahmad made the claim that she was connected with the observatory. If you want more details about this, just let me know, I will furnish them. Some SDAs still refer to this claimed USNO support as proof that the lunar Sabbath must be wrong, quoting certain letters from the USNO. However, within a year of Ahmad's death, Denton E. Revick, president of the SDA Theological Seminary, himself wrote to Glenn Draper in which he inquired, one of our teachers is in receipt of a letter which concerns a statement made by Miss Grace Ahmad to the Committee on Chronology, of which she was a member. She stated that she had your endorsement on some of her computations, but did not specify. The question is, assuming that you gave an endorsement, did this concern or include her position that the Jewish Passover in the year 31 AD fell on a Friday? As she is now deceased, we would appreciate a word from you. D. E. Revick, letter to Glenn H. Draper, dated February 26, 1946. Draper confirmed that he had indeed checked over the work of Ahmad, adding the following caution, but as I told her so frequently there may be some question in accepting the premises as real. They are interesting and furnish as consistent a set of conclusions as any I have seen on the subject, although they seem to contain several precepts of almost hearsay. They are novel to say the least. In other words, Draper was explaining, Ahmad made some assumptions. If one accepts her assumptions as correct, her conclusions are consistent with her assumptions. Revick was not entirely satisfied with Draper's response and wrote again, asking, I wonder if you would be willing to offer your comments or counsel regarding the premises upon which Miss Grace Almadon based her work, or if you would feel free to give us the facts so far as science and mathematics know them concerning the Passover day in the year 31, as well as the other years which are now considered by various groups studying the problem. Draper was pressed for time and not interested in a lengthy discussion. He replied curtly, I am a little perturbed to know exactly what you desire, as Miss Almadon's work must certainly be in your possession and states for itself what it is. Briefly, though, it assumes that the Paschal moon is the important moon and not the new moon. Her calendar is refreshing in its, at present, novel premise that the Jews knew enough of the motions of the moon to predict the time at which the moon would be full. The Paschal feast should never arrive before the full moon is her major premise. I have never heard of any other modern who claims this, but it was indeed interesting to me to see how she was able to make a consistent chronology on that premise. It appears in many respects to be the most consistent chronology I have seen, although it requires the difficult assumption that the priests knew a great deal more of the laws of motion of the moon than they recorded as such. Miss Almadon had faith that the priests were able to regulate the entire year by observations of the new moons of a previous year. It is difficult to understand now how they were able to do this, as we have only in the last 300 years been able to reproduce this feat. From the evidence available, it appears that Almadon took Draper's acknowledgement of the consistency of her assumptions as blanket support for them. Wiertz quickly disabused Froome of such a notion. In his letter to Froome, Wiertz pointedly asks, well, Brother Froome, the question is, what did Mr. Draper check and endorse? Answer 1. Mr. Draper, in the capacity of an astronomer, checked and endorsed the following calendrical, astronomical facts. And then he lists 4 astronomical points covering 1. The specific time of conjunction after the vernal equinox in AD 31, 2. The precise length of the translation period, 3. The exact time of the full moon, and 4. The Julian day number as being 1,732,495. He then adds, bluntly, the above 4 calendrical, astronomical facts Mr. Draper, as an astronomer, checked and affirmed is calendrically and astronomically correct. But now, Brother Froome, let this fact be well observed. 1. Mr. Draper, in his astronomical capacity, did not affirm that the moon's conjunction of Tuesday, April 10, B14H 31 meters was the new moon that determined the biblical Nisan 1, 4032 AM 2. Mr. Draper, in his astronomical capacity, did not affirm that the new moon's translation period of 3 days 3 hours 33 minutes determined the biblical Nisan 1 to fall on Saturday, April 14, in 31 AD 3. Mr. Draper, in his astronomical capacity, did not affirm that the full moon of Wednesday was the full moon that determined the biblical Passover for 31 AD 4. Mr. Draper, in his astronomical capacity, did not affirm that the unaccountable darkness of the sun occurred on Friday, April 27, 31 AD. Draper, letter to Revick, March 5, 1946, emphasis supplied. Wiertz, letter to Froome, June 29, 1945. Glenn Draper was both a scientist and an employee of the U.S. government. As such, he provided technical and astronomical information. He did not provide any confirmation of that information when interpreted in a religious context. As Wiertz explained to Froome, experience during the course of many years with several astronomers at the U.S. Naval Observatory, including 2 of Peter-acting astronomers, has shown that they are always willing, and even pleased, to assist in the finding of calendrical astronomical facts and data. But they simply refuse, and will not interpret, neither affirm nor deny biblical, chronological events data in the light of astronomical facts. Wiertz clearly summed up the ramifications of this lack of claimed USNO support. Wiertz continues, therefore, Brother Froome, please observe and understand that Mr. Draper's checking of Miss Almadon's supposed crucifixion data claims is of no value whatsoever in the establishment of biblical evidence, neither does Mr. Draper's checking proved that Friday, April 27, 31 AD is the day and the date of the crucifixion. Wiertz speaking. Therefore, the so-called checking and affirming of Mr. Draper's above calendrical, astronomical facts is of no value whatsoever in the solution of our problem. Furthermore, Brother Froome, do you know that Miss Almadon's claim for the crucifixion day and date of Friday, April 27, 31 AD is only assertion without proof whatsoever? Seventh-day Adventists have always taught that the 2,300-day prophecy of Daniel 8 and the 70-week prophecy pointing to the Messiah of Daniel 9 began at the same point in time, 457 BC. In order to support Daniel's 2,300-day per year prophecy ending on October 22, 1844, Grace Amadon and the committee were left with 1 year and 1 year only for the crucifixion, AD 31. The problem was that AD 31 provides incontrovertible proof that the modern weekly cycle differs from the biblical weekly cycle because Passover on Aviv 14 that year does not fall on Friday. This was a big problem because if the crucifixion did not occur on Friday, then the next day, Sabbath, did not fall on Saturday. In order to continue to have a Saturday Sabbath, Amadon had to force a Friday crucifixion at all costs. She did this by stretching out the moon's translation period to a ridiculous length and by insisting, historical and astronomical evidence to the contrary, that the paschal full moon always fell on Aviv 13. It was skillful juggling of the data, stretching it to the breaking point, but Wiertz let Froome know in no uncertain terms that Draper, as a USNO astronomer, had confirmed only astronomical facts. He did not confirm those manipulations of the data that provided a Friday crucifixion. Wiertz continues. Thus, Brother Froome, by these calendrical, astronomical demonstrated facts it can plainly be seen that Miss Amadon's claim for the crucifixion on Friday, April 27, 31 AD is only assertion, without the least biblical, prophetical, chronological, typical, calendarical, astronomical scientific proof. And without such we would have no more proof than all those other theorists have for their claims. Use Amadon had made of astronomy to support an AD 31, Friday crucifixion was not honest or consistent. On page 5 of his letter, Wiertz lists a number of inconsistencies in Amadon's conclusions regarding unisolar calendation principles used in 1843-1844, insisting on each one that what she had climbed was not true, although she, in fact, knew what the truth was. He summarizes his list by asking, why then did she resort to such deceitful, misleading trickery? Answer of Miss Amadon in all her work in the Research Committee's Report No. 1, Part 5 has made the erroneous claim over and over again that the Passover moon must always become full on Nisan 13, but never on Nisan 14 this, in order to force a Friday crucifixion. B. Therefore, if she had allowed her supposed Nisan 1 to fall on April 1 where the rabbinical Jews had it, then of course, her supposed Passover day Nisan 14, would have fallen on April 14, on the day of the full moon. Therefore, if her supposed Passover day, her Nisan 14, had fallen on April 14, on the day when the moon had become full, she would have contradicted all her erroneous claims put forth in her Part 5 of the Research Committee's Report No. 1. It is therefore obvious that she rather resorted to deceitful calendar data juggling than to truth. Therefore, in order to save her erroneous claims from complete disaster, she rather stooped to the misinterpreting, misleading, deceitful calendar day and data juggling, perhaps thinking and hoping to get away with it. Because as can be shown and proven that she got away with so many other erroneous things in the presence of the Research Committee. Therefore, it can be presumed that she hoped that she also would get away with this. Perhaps she may not have thought that this problem is the same as any mathematical problem which at any time may be investigated to ascertain if the conclusions drawn are right or wrong. If right they will stand, but if wrong they will fall. Wiertz's letter, as blunt and pointed as it was an anguished cry for truth to triumph. He ends his letter by appealing for an honest, unbiased study of the subject. If the General Conference officials would ever allow a careful investigation to be made along all those above lines, it would be proven, established and demonstrated, that Miss Amadon was a very brilliant, willful, deceptive, misleading calendar data juggler. And it would be proven and established and demonstrated that all her expensive work during those 7 long years has not served to construct, but to destruct the data of our message. However, the blame for all this confusion and misunderstanding rests on the shoulders of the Research Committee, and especially on you, Brother Froome, as chairman of the Research Committee from the fall of 1938 until July 20, 1942. And, furthermore, you as editor of the Ministry, are responsible for all that erroneous Amadonian material which you have allowed to appear in the Ministry. One more item. Well, Brother Froome, you remember that Sunday evening meeting on July 9, 1939, in the General Conference Chapel, when Miss Almadon had given out that loose sheet, and then expounded its erroneous contents of the 1844 question in the hearing of that important assembly, which she finally climaxed when her supposed brilliance flashed forth with her foot stamping, declaring in her apparent triumph, "What more do you want?" Well, Brother Froome, she almost got away with it that evening. But as I had carefully studied her part 5 and knew all the misleading, deceitful tricks and errors in it, and then her boldness to give out that loose sheet with its glaring, deceitful, misleading errors in it, I was then determined to strike her whole misleading, deceitful arguments a paralyzing blow, which I am glad I did at that important meeting, and I am glad to say that from that paralyzing blow Miss Almadon nor her associates, the research committee, have never been able to dare to try to extricate her argument on the October 22, 1844 question. I know, Brother Froome, that these are harsh, unkind, yes, serious statements, but for the sake of the truth, and the great cause that we love more than life itself, and in the hope that the beautiful, prophetic, messianic data truth may come to light, I challenge you to challenge me to prove my claims. In closing, let me say, and for your own information, that all the above, and much more has been revealed, and is in the hands of several general, union and local officials. Therefore, I am sure, that sooner or later an official investigation of this whole important prophetic data matter will be demanded. The truth in our message demands that the true prophetic interpretation on all this must come to light, sooner or later. If the stones must cry it out. Unfortunately, there is no evidence that Froome ever accepted Wiert's challenge. To this day, the SDA Church has never reconciled the inconsistencies in an open, harmonious manner. Correspondence preserved in the Grace Almadon collection reveals the research committee and its topic of study were initially discussed on a fairly wide basis across North America. The expectation was that the committee's findings would be officially published for the benefit of the church members. After the committee dug into the subject in depth, however, and realized they did not have a ready answer for what they repeatedly referred to as the problem of the crucifixion date, it appears efforts were made to limit the discussion to a few, in the need-to-know, scholars. Not all of the material gathered by the committee is available to the public, either. For all her failings in other areas, Almadon was a meticulous record keeper. Even short exchanges most people would not keep, she preserved in her files. Where are the Andreessen letters given to the 1995 committee, which were picked up again before the men were allowed to leave the room? Where is Wiert's original document? It was to be provided to the 1995 committee, but the committee was shut down before they saw it. When asked if he had any suggestions on where the document could be obtained, a member of the 1995 committee responded, "They will never give it to you. They are not going to let that out." He was correct. Despite diligent efforts, the document has not surfaced. The following places all deny knowledge of it. Center for Adventist Research, Andrews University Archives and Statistics Department, General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Ministerial Department of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Ministerial Department of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists. Why has this document been buried so deeply? What evidence does it contain? If the arguments Wiertz presented could have been answered, the SDA Church would have already done so. Their strenuous efforts to keep this from the people suggest the information it contains is believed to be too damaging to ever see the light of day. Otherwise, why withhold it from the common church member? It would be well for those who desire to know all truth to ask the Seventh-day Adventist Church leadership to make this material available. Or, if not, explain why it is being withheld. The church did not stop studying the issue of the two different calendars, nor did the Advent Research Committee disband after presenting its report in July of 1939. The name was later changed to the Historical Research Committee and membership changed as some of the original members retired, died or were assigned other duties that precluded their active involvement with the committee. Froome served as chairman until 1943, at which time Milton E. Kern assumed chairmanship, although Froome remained a member. The last time this author was able to uncover reference to the committee was a passing mention in Box 15, Folder 8 of the J. L. McIlhenny collection at the Center for Adventist Research. Thurber, M.R., a statement on the research committee and its work, and a lengthy paper, published by Review and Herald Publishing Association in 1953. This document, entitled The Chronology of Ezra 7, is subtitled, A Report of the Historical Research Committee of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. The members at this time consisted of Lynn Harper Wood, L. E. Froome, Milton E. Kern and O. Homer Teasdale of the original committee, as well as new members, Walter E. Reed, Chairman, Merwin R. Thurber, Secretary, Cephfired H. Horn, Frederick Lee, Julia Newfer, Denton E. Revick and Frank H. Yost.